The Australian Government Summer School for Teachers of Mathematics was conducted at the University of New England in January 2008. 200 mathematics teachers from across Australia came to UNE and heard high-profile presentations and undertook workshops and tutorials. Professor John Hattie, Professor of Education at the University of Auckland, gave a presentation entitled, "What Does Feedback Mean?" John, I was wondering if you could just tell us what was the main theme of your presentation.
Yeah, I was trying to get across the notion about feedback being information about the task that relates to one of three questions. Where am I going? How am I going? And where to next? As how you can increase the amount of that kind of feedback about the task in any one lesson has a dramatic effect on students' learning.
Right. So how would this be relevant to teachers of contemporary mathematics?
The first, I think, Russell, is a mindset. If information is about the task, it's very much about how you as the teacher use that information to make changes to your own teaching program. Like, I worked for many years trying to increase the amount of feedback kids got in the daily classroom, which is unfortunately measured in seconds, and I was very unsuccessful at doing that. I then tried to work with the students and increase their help seeking, and I was unsuccessful at that. And it was only when I got to the notion that the feedback is to the teacher. It's not the other way around. It's how teachers can see that any lesson, any assessment they do, any lesson they're running, is how they can increase the feedback to them about how they're going, where they're going, and where to next. Then you get a massive dividend in terms of the effect on student learning. And so my major message is how you as a teacher can set up a classroom lesson, a classroom set of instruction to maximise that feedback about, for all the students, about where they're at, where they're going, what they do and they don't understand. And if you think of it that way, you get major mileage from it.
Right. So what were the key ideas or issues that you were hoping that the participants of the summer school might take away from your presentation?
I think it's looking at different strategies we can use to maximise that information back to the teacher. And what I've been trying to do in my own context in New Zealand is look at how we can use assessment. And I have this sort of cliche that says every time we give an assessment, if the teacher doesn't learn something, it was a waste of time. And so it's how we can use assessment procedures to maximise that information about what the kids don't know, when they make errors. And so certainly that's one of the most powerful things. And what other kind of strategies can we use in terms of students talking to other students, which is very powerful. And what they do, what they don't know, what kind of questions they ask, and what kind of, if they're low-level questions, that's where they're at. And it can give me a tremendous amount of information about where I should go next. And so it's that whole kind of strategic thinking of finding different ways to understand how learning is occurring through the eyes of the student.
Right. Now I just wonder about the teachers when they go back into schools. I suppose a measure of our success in the summer school will be what they can actually implement and take back from here. Are there ideas that you see can be readily implemented in the classroom?
Well, my challenge would be is to go back and, for example, look at students' workbook, see what kind of comments you've been writing, remove all those about the praise side of the thing and put them to the side because they don't have any effect on the learning, and look at the comments that are left over and say, can I do better than that? Because that's what the student sees, is what you've written. Constantly ask the students what they do understand, what they don't understand. I know it sounds a bit negative, but to have that mental set is, I need to know who hasn't and what hasn't been taught very well.
Yes.
And then constantly go back over that. We're very good at picking up cues about what we do good at.
Yes.
But it's picking up those other cues. Who haven't I succeeded and why? But the other half of it is worrying about that classroom climate. Because feedback occurs when I make mistakes.
Right.
And so you've got to have a climate in the classroom where error is not only tolerated, it's welcomed.
Yes.
And the kids have the courage to make mistakes. And when they have the courage to err, and that's not easy. Secondary schools, learning's not always cool. And a lot of peer pressure in those classrooms to not look dumb and stupid. It requires a tremendous art to construct a classroom. And sometimes it's getting kids working in groups and building some confidence about admitting, I don't know. How did you go about that? What strategy do you use? And using the students as your co-teachers. Because if you think of notions like self-regulation, which I find a very jargon word, I think of it as when students become the teachers, then they can regulate their learning. And that's what we want. And I think most of us would probably agree that we learned more about our subject when we went to teaching Make the kids the teachers.
Teachers, yes.
Make the kids the teachers of themselves. That's what you want to do. And so if you think of that mindset, then you can increase the amount of feedback.
Right. It's been interesting across all of the presentations. I think one of the things which has emerged strongly is this sense of risk-taking, and it's risk-taking for the students and having an environment, as you said, which is comfortable for them to feel they can make errors and take the risks in that. But it's also risk-taking for the teachers. I mean, they have to change practices and be prepared to try new and different things and maybe not work, but have a go at that.
But part of that too is that that's where challenge is important. That's where a more successful class is when the stuff is difficult.
Yes.
Appropriately difficult is the art of teaching. But challenge works because the more you are involved in a task that's challenging, the more feedback's important.
Right.
If the task is not challenging, feedback's not needed.
No.
So those two things go together very closely.
Great. Now, just for those participants who want to read a little bit further or see more resources on the ideas that you've presented, are there some sources you could direct them to?
Yes, Shirley Clark has a book on feedback, which I think is quite good. We've written an article available from any good library, probably an academic library, in Review of Educational Research on feedback and what it means.
Right.
And again, Jeff Petty's book has got a very good section on feedback.
Fine. All right, well, John, thank you very much for the wonderful presentations and thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you.